Good evening. It is Tuesday, February 5th, 2019 at 7 o'clock p.m. I'd like to call to order the Town of Sutton Board of Selectmen's meeting. If you would all join us in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First agenda item is public forum. Public forum is limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Anybody here for public forum? Seeing no one. Next agenda item is our minutes from the January 22nd, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our January 22nd meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Next item is a Price Chopper Market 32 change in corporate officers. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the attorney?
Yes.
Mr. Richard here, on behalf of Price Chopper. They would like to change 2 of its corporate officers. Other than that, there are no changes to take place, so I turn it
Just
over.
identify yourself for the record, please.
Yes, Eugene Richard, Hurwitz, Richard, and Sensabaugh.
And representing Market 32. You want to just tell us
Correct.
a little bit about what's going on?
Yes, actually, Mr. Smith just stole my thunder. There are 2 new officers. There should be no change whatsoever at the store level. Same manager, same operations, same directors, the president, CEO, and secretary are not changing. So what's changing is the treasurer, executive vice president of finance, and CFO, chief financial officer, is going to be a man named James Peterson. He's replacing 2 people. Those jobs were split up, and now they're coordinated or consolidated with Mr. Peterson. And there is also a new assistant secretary. Actually, the secretary has not changed, but they've added an assistant, and her name is Carrie Terra Firma. So other than those 2 individuals, nothing is changing.
Okay. So typically what we do is open it up to the board to ask you any questions, so. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be honest with you, I don't really know. I mean, essentially what we're doing is just rewriting some names in our files, correct?
It's housekeeping, correct.
It's housekeeping, plainly, and I wouldn't imagine that there would be any concerns from, Dennis or anybody. So, yeah, I'll be honest with you, can't think of any questions because it sounds like, again, it's just a filing issue. So, thank you, Mr.
Great.
Chairman.
Thank you. Wendy?
I have nothing, David, thank you.
Jonathan?
I have no questions.
So I think I'm just going to reiterate the same thing. These are like high-level corporate kind of changes and really don't affect anything at the local level at all.
That's correct. I think these individuals, they have a number of entities, including, the corporate parent. The licensee is a Massachusetts corporation, and I think they're just making it through the whole organization.
Touch everybody, every community that has one of
We
these.
are required to bring it before the board to get approval, and that's why we're here.
All right, then. I think that is all we need. So we have a motion, I believe.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve a change of 2 corporate officers for Price Chopper, DBA Market 32 at 21 Galaxy Pass in Sutton, Massachusetts.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. That was easy. Thank
Yeah.
you for coming down. Appreciate your
it.
time.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Doreen DeFazio with the Green Community Update in the MVP grant process. Jim, I don't know if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, Doreen couldn't make the last meeting, and we had to postpone it to tonight. But she'll give you an update on the Green Communities process, where we are today, what we've been going through, and then the MVP process.
Great.
So,
Doreen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. And I haven't been in front of the board in quite a while, too, so there's 2 new board members here this evening, so I'm going to back up a little bit and explain a little bit about the Green Communities program, the history of the program, and then bring you up to date on where we are today. So the program started in 2011 here in Sutton, and it's a program from DOER. And I should say, too, that I'm the Director of Sustainability for the town, so I work under Jim and also under guidance from the town planner a lot as well. So that being said, back in 2011, before my time, there was an application for the town through DOER to become a green community. And through guidelines, we were able to obtain that status and apply for about $250,000 worth of grants in the town per year. Really, it's really more than 1 year. We have 2 years to complete it. Our projects typically are done within a year time frame, which is great because then we can go and apply for a grant the following year. So to date, we've received almost $1 million in funding from the state. A lot of that is taken out of capital items as well, as was last year in 2018. So last year, going by calendar year, we finished 2018 with saving about $150,000 off of the capital plan, doing a boiler replacement at the elementary school. And so that was originally on the capital plan, and it was funded by Green Communities. We also upgraded LED lights in the middle school and high school gymnasium and have had very positive feedback on not only with the quality of those lights compared to what they were, but there's also an energy savings there as well. And we're phasing out LED lights within the middle school, high school. So the first phase was about 75 different locations throughout the school, costing about $90,000. Again, 100% paid for by the state, which reduces energy and reduces cost in those buildings. So the next phase is to apply for yet another grant this year, and we're looking at replacing the school chiller. And typically, that's at end of life right now, and typically those chillers cost about $250,000. So we're looking to fund at least part of this through Green Communities. DOER likes a variety in what we apply for, so we won't be asking for the whole $250 just for one project. It's also good from the town standpoint to not just apply for one project every year. So we're also looking at expanding car charging locations throughout Sutton. The state has been pushing for more and more charging stations to go throughout the state, and there's another program through DEP called EVIP that just became available for additional funds as well. And typically DOER will require us to apply for the EVIP funds as well. So we're hoping to have maybe a charging station down at the school, another one up in this area. We're also working with local businesses such as the Galaxy location to perhaps even put one or two over there in that plaza. So that's really where we are with Green Communities. Right now, we have the goal of Green Communities was to reduce our energy by 20%. As of today, Sutton is at about 31.54% to be exact. So now looking at the numbers, typically our energy usage may go up a little bit as National Grid will put the usage from the end of the year really up until March. So that number may fluctuate a little bit, but as of today, that's where we stand at 31%. So congratulations to Sutton, because that's a great number. So like I said, we're looking at incentives for electric vehicles, and our main project next year will be the school chiller, and that application will be going out in March. So I can stop there first to see if there's any additional questions on what's going on with Green Communities before I move forward to the Community Vulnerability Program.
Sounds good.
The beauty of this program and with Doreen and what she does is that she follows this process from beginning to end, and we haven't missed a year in what, four plus years. So when, she follows the projects, we get funding in the summer, usually June or July, And from that point, we really bird dogged the state to make sure we receive the money and we begin the projects. And, you know, we've been following the Guardian that was doing the LED light conversion in this fall, as well as MPC that was doing the boiler replacement. Both of those projects, we were just pushing really hard to get them done. We went out to bid, I think, before we even got the grant for the boilers, just to time it all. But none of that would be possible without Doreen's work following through on everything. You know, besides doing the actual grant process, she has to do quarterly reports, annual reports, and summarize the grant conclusion to be able to apply for a subsequent grant. So she just does a lot of work for us that we don't have the time to do, so it's a terrific benefit.
Excellent. Jessica, any comments?
Hi, Doreen.
Hi,
How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good to see you as well. For my colleagues, my newer colleagues, I just have to, preface any comments I have to say but my usual tagline whenever Doreen comes before us is that whenever Doreen's here, we're saving money. And as Jim laid out and as you explained, nearly $1 million in just a couple of years' effort. That's actual money. And as you mentioned, these are items that normally we would have to pay through the capital fund, but we're being reimbursed with these grant funds. So thank you so much for your effort on this. And again, I'm hoping this next one, you're consistent, your track record of success. Another point that I'd like to make is I think one of the reasons why Doreen in Sutton has been so successful is that you have done a great job maintaining relationships, not only with other communities, but also at the state level as well. I think back when you and I traveled to Boston to receive a check 2 years ago, and it seemed like everybody that was involved in the program had nice things to say to you and about you. So I think, again, that speaks to Jim's statement. You are following through at every point to make sure that we are one of those communities that are always receiving the top award level. So, again, thank you. It's really, really good for the taxpayers of town. I do have one question, and I might have misheard you speaking. You mentioned that you were phasing out the LED at the schools?
No, we're doing a 3-phase project at the school.
So you're
there's
removing the old incandescent bulbs or fluorescent
Correct.
bulbs? Okay.
Correct. And because of the expense and because we like variety in the grant application, we decided to break it down, and we worked with Guardian Energy. And we broke it down into 3 separate phases. So phase 1 was some classrooms, I think the auditorium, I may be wrong on that. I have a list of mostly classrooms in the in the high school, and coming to $90,000. So we really came up with a number that we wanted to stop at so we could fit in the boilers and the other projects as well. So there probably will not be a phase 2 this year. We will likely go after a considerable amount of funding to pay for the chillers to take that out of the capital, or at least a good portion of it. If we have a small percentage, we'll do phase 2, and or we'll continue phase 2 in 2020.
Have you heard any feedback yet in terms of whereabouts the needle will lie in terms of splitting the costs of the chiller?
No. John Kuchar is working on getting a quote for us, so we're starting there. We're starting with
so
what the
it's still
amount
early.
is. It's still early. We should know that number in the next week or so, and we'll take it from there. So, but I've had discussions with Kelly Brown from the state, and she's been a great advisor to Sutton, and will lead us in the right direction of what makes most sense to have a successful application.
Excellent. And last question I had, you'd mentioned the car charging.
Yes.
We currently have one outside Town Hall.
We do.
Do we have any other in town at the moment?
We do not. So potential sites would include another one here at this building, the school, and the new police station. These are all in discussion. It's going to depend on all these costs coming together.
Right.
And then as a separate project too, this would not come out of necessarily, it would not come out of Green Communities because it's not municipal.
Oh, okay.
But we're working with Galaxy and another grant, the EVIP grant application, if we can fund the charging station, or at least a portion of it, we would work with Galaxy and also who the owner is of, so we need someone to be able to do maintenance there too. So we're still in the early stages of that as well, but kind of going with the green efforts, like we did with the LED lights, anything outside of the Green Communities program. It's kind of a nice thought to think that from Worcester to Providence, there would be charging stations in the town of Sutton right off of 146 that people could come off, patronize our businesses, charge their car, continue on their way. So that's another project that we're looking to do. So hopefully, to answer your question, in the next year or so, we will double or triple what we have in town right now.
Perfect, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you. You've come with a halo that has preceded you. So I'd like to thank you for all of your efforts on behalf of the community. I know that,
Thank you, Wendy.
as a small community, we certainly couldn't afford so many of these items that, your grants have created a pathway for us to receive them. So we're eternally grateful for your efforts. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you very much for your work. Not only have we saved $1 million so far, but we've also reduced the energy costs by 31%. So it's, adding those two together is that's on an ongoing basis. So
Correct.
That's pretty amazing. That's a lot more than I ever expected. So that's great news. I do have one question about the chargers. So how is that? So how is the cost covered? Like when people use it, are they paying for it, or is something that the town covers? Like how's that? Was that funded?
It, essentially, because we are getting state money, the requirement is that they're open for all, residents in the state of Massachusetts or anywhere. So anybody that has an electric car can use one of these chargers. Now, the charges out here are generally taken by the fire department car and the town manager's car. So there's really no additional chargers here at Town Hall. The school department has requested a charger down at that location, so we are contemplating a location where we could put a charger. And then we're thinking about putting a charger adjacent to the old police station garage, to the side of the garage, that will give Robin a chance to park his car up here and be available when we move the fire department to the old police department. So a lot of moving factors there. And then we're talking about putting a charger down at the new police department. So we're putting the infrastructure in place for the eventuality of, electric cars as commonplace in the state of Massachusetts. And they're really pushing the electric car movement in the state. So ultimately, we can't charge if we accept the grant.
Right.
Long
So it
answer.
just becomes like, so the cost of the electricity.
That's what we have to, the charger out here it was about $20 a month, and it's now $200 a month. So it's about $2,000 a year total cost to charge 2 electric cars, which is cheaper than the gasoline that you'd put in the cars if they were, gasoline powered.
Oh, and we got the cars from the state too. So
For
that's
free.
the other,
So, there is an advantage, but there is, that's the downside, is that you allow for free charging.
Same, like if we do this at like Galaxy at their location, like would that?
no,
be-
that'll be a different requirement. And that's, and I'm sort of trailblazing this as something new. So I'm not positive on all these answers, but I think that what they're trying to do is find a business that is occupying the space who will manage it. So thinking that, it would be an incentive for them to have those charging stations. So That's outside of municipal, that's outside of these requirements, so they'd be different. But the state does require, as Jim was saying, for us even, there's a sign downstairs that says public electric charging station. So we had to have that sign put up and have it available to the public, so.
Is there-
Right now, it's mostly used by municipal, but it is available to anyone.
Is there any other kind of public advertising? If I'm driving down the highway, can I Google
Yes.
and discover that there's one there?
Yeah.
Yeah, ask the driver of the electric vehicle, he
There are
knows.
a couple of apps that you can get downloaded on your phone, and they point out local charging stations across the state of Massachusetts, or even across the nation, I suppose. I've only looked at them in Massachusetts, but, you know, and the sites pop up, and, you know, Millbury Town Hall, Millbury Library is one of the sites that shows up. There's Sutton Town Hall. There are other sites in this area that show up. So there are apps on the phone where people can find these locations.
All right, I'm all set. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that line of questioning, how long does a typical charge?
The chargers that we're looking at for Galaxy Plaza are so-called fast chargers. So you can charge your car in an hour. In a half hour, you can probably get half a charge, which is typically about 100, 150 miles. So you can get a legitimate charge in a half hour with these fast chargers. The slow chargers, the phase 2 chargers that we have out here in Town Hall, are about 20 to 25 miles an hour. So, you know, if you're at, you know, no charge, for instance, and you plug it in during the morning, by the end of the day, you'll be at a full charge of 200 plus miles.
So we're reasonably confident the one we have here is mostly used by town employees, because you're kind of, in a way, sort of monopolizing the.
Yeah, both, although, you know, a few of the people that do use them,
Yeah.
and we are aware of a couple of them. You know, I've had, Colin McCullough has an electric car, for instance. He was on the Green Committee years ago, and he comes in, notices, you know, Robin's car is fully charged. He'll take the charger out of the car and plug in his car, and he'll stay by the car just in case Robin needs the car, and charge his car right there, so,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. If I can circle back to the grants for just a moment.
Absolutely.
So it's really been covered, but just to sort of reiterate, once upon a time, we were one of only 6 communities in the Commonwealth that were actually established as green communities. I think that number's gone up since then.
That it actually reached the 20% threshold. So we were one of 6.
I don't have the exact number.
Yeah, that was back a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But I think we're still in the leading with the energy reduction, going well beyond 20% and now
Yes.
exceeding 30%.
So we were certainly pioneers, I would say, in this area around the Commonwealth.
Absolutely, certainly in Central Mass.
So in the early days, there must have been a certain amount of grant funding to allow us to get to the green community status. A lot of those grants were kind of like funding the project itself to get up to the 20% commitment level.
Right.
But the one thing I wanted to highlight is certainly at least since that time, many of these projects that we're doing are projects that we otherwise would have had to do anyway. Like the chillers, an end-of-life item that we're going to get significant kinds of funding on, without this green community designation, we wouldn't be able to get that funding. So this chiller is an example of something that without the green communities designation being in place, we wouldn't really be eligible for this grant.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, and you know what we do is we apply for an energy-efficient, top-end product, which is a little bit more expensive, but at the same time, we get $150,000 from the state.
Yep.
And the town contributes $100,000 in our capital plan.
And as Jonathan points out, in addition to the direct funding, the grant funding, the overall energy savings that we've achieved over the course of many years and every year into the future is very significant for our budget, so worth restating, it seemed to me. That's all I have, so if you want to move on to the MVP discussion, that'd be great.
Well, I just wanted to finish up Green Communities by, you know, thanking you all for the praise, but once again, I think it's important to bring up that this is a community effort. Certainly, I'm here part-time, and I do as much work as I can on this project, but under the leadership of Jim, under the leadership of this board, with direction oftentimes from our planning director, our building commissioner, Roger Raymond down at the schools. There's a lot of different players that go into this depending on the project. So I do not do this as a solo committee or department by any means. So I appreciate your support and leadership, and the community has also been great supporting the Green Communities Project as well. So that's really the reason for the success. I just fill out the paperwork and see it through. That seems like the easy part. So moving on to the Community Vulnerability Program. So this is another state-funded project dealing with climate change issues on the local level. And so this was brought up as an executive order from the governor last year or the year before, and several of our neighboring communities applied for this grant in the last round, and Sutton applied for it this year in this round. So we're having a 2-day invitation-only workshop on Thursday and Friday of this week, and the purpose of the workshop is to take the hazard mitigation plan that was done a couple years ago and really expand on that. So we've taken the work done from that hazard mitigation plan, and the state has a sort of a matrix to put together to pull out additional information on what Sutton's strengths are and what our vulnerabilities are. And based on those priorities, we will have an action item list that will go back to the state. And from that list will come a report done by me, and then there will also be a public presentation that will be done before the deadline of June 1st. So I would say probably early May. And the purpose of going through this process is to apply for additional funding for those priority items, of those vulnerable items for extreme weather, drought, flooding, all the issues that were brought up in that hazard mitigation report a few years ago. So we have about 25 people who will be in attendance at Blackstone National on Thursday and Friday. And yeah, I'll be leading the facilitation, but again, just like before, I've had a lot of help in this, starting with applying for the grant. One of our residents, Lee Dillard Adams, brought it to our attention and helped me with the grant process, applying for this application. We received the funding for it. And since then, we've put together a core team here internally who has helped kind of put together the guides for this workshop that will happen this week. So if any of you are able to join us, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Jesse, questions?
I don't know if it's questions. I don't really know how to phrase it. Thank you, obviously, for your efforts, because it's going to result in us getting money. That's
the hope.
That's the hope. My concern is, and again, and this is not necessarily directed at anything that you or our town is going to do. My concern is that the climate change is, in my opinion, it's a political movement. And I'm concerned not only how this process was created, via executive order, so that means that was a decision by the governor and the executive branch, as opposed to legislative initiatives, so there were no public hearings and discussions on this. My concern is always potential strings that are going to be attached down the road.
Mm-hmm. From the state?
From the state.
Okay.
And I heard in the news, the governor slipped into the budget a mechanism to offset climate change initiatives, with the increased property tax that's going to come on the sales. And again, my fear is this part of a process that's going to drive the state in a direction that in the long run is going to impose limitations on the residents, not only in Sutton, but in the Commonwealth? Again, for something that there's no way to know what the outcome's gonna be. Because, you know, you hear, again, the politics of it, and you hear about stuff that's gonna happen 100 years down the road. So is this going to require, I don't know, extra costs in constructing houses? Is it going to impact, and again, I'm trying to think of ways that it would.
I understand what you're saying. So, can I address that?
Oh, please do.
Okay, so, two comments. One is, I don't think by us working and preparing on a local level, we'll be able to change those policies regardless. So if the state wants to change building codes again based on, you know, climate change, we're really not gonna have a say in that. Secondly, from speaking to community members such as local farms, local golf courses, they are already experiencing extreme weather patterns that are hurting their businesses, drought, flooding. And so getting the community in a room and having these discussions, I think can only bring out positive results. So that's how I'm going into it. I'm, you know, obviously just like Green Communities, I've got my eye on the prize. If I can get more money for Sutton to, you know, help with some of the vulnerabilities, that's great. But I also think having this initial discussion post the hazard mitigation plan and building off of that is an important thing to do. And one of the reasons I love working in local government is because I really like being where the rubber meets the road, and you don't get that on the state level. And so, despite the fact that this is a state project, I think it's an important initiative for the town to do. And wherever we grow it from there on a local level is up to us as well. So I'll certainly go after the funding, and we can call it climate change, we can call it, you know, extreme weather patterns, we can call it whatever we want, but
I'd be happy with just green in our pockets.
okay, exactly. So all of those is what I'm going to be addressing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I can appreciate that, because I remember when we were presented with the hazard mitigation plan, and I know there were definite areas in and around town that were concerns. We have a couple of dams, you know, we have roads, we have culverts, and there was definitely a concern. So I suppose in the grand scheme of things, in the short term at the very least, if we can get some funding to make shoring them up, repairing them, preventing further erosion, I suppose in the long run we'll be better off.
Right, or just reviewing where our shelters are, or if a road closes down, you know, do we have vulnerable community members that can't get to a shelter in an extreme flood? It's hard to say what discussions will come up. We will have table facilitators to help sort of drive the conversations of these discussions, to make sure these priorities are brought up. And you know, I absolutely see your point as well, and that's why I work in local government.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, thank you. Wendy?
Thank you. Just briefly, I'm sure we'll be hearing within the hour all about climate change or the perceived lack thereof. But regardless of that, I think what you're pursuing has legitimate value on the community level and amongst other levels as well. But I do appreciate what you're doing. As someone who's been in this town for some time, I've had conversations with small business owners in town who are encountering some significant issues already. So I do appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Wendy.
Jonathan?
Thank you. I think, well, one thing I would be really interested to see what the vulnerabilities are. I think you mentioned there was some other work done prior.
So there was a hazard mitigation plan done. Jim, do you know what year that was? It was before my time.
Oh, probably
2013?
No, it was a little later than that,
Okay.
14, 15,
Okay.
a few years ago.
Okay. So, so that plan was based more on emergency management, and this is going to be more specific to diving into those vulnerabilities. So part of the layout from the state is to take community hazards, and because Sutton has already done that plan, I already have them. and they haven't been changed since that report. So those are the ones that will be laid out at the meeting, and then we'll dive deeper into deeper details, like I said, about the strengths and weaknesses within those hazards that we have. So we're taking what hazards were found in that mitigation plan and saying, okay, with, let's take drought as an example. What are the town's strengths and weaknesses? And then we dive into action plans based on that. So, and also, as I mentioned, there will be a report that will come out and that will be public, and as well as a public meeting as a requirement, and the public will be welcome to attend that as well.
Is that report, the prior report, the hazards report, is that available to the public now?
It is. It is.
Where
yep.
is that located?
So it's located, I am not sure if it's on, I found it through CMRPC's website because they did the report. But I can also have that posted on the Sutton Town website as well.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay,
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
thank you.
You mentioned it already, but I thought it's worth repeating a couple of people to thank. So Blackstone National
Yes,
volunteered some
Thank you
space
for
for us to
saying
host
that.
these meetings,
Yes,
so
yes.
appreciate that they did that. Lee Dillard Adams, I think, is a former DEP employee. so-
correct. And I mean, she brought this to the town's attention, and she helped me through the entire grant process, helped write half the grant, and, really brought this to where we are today, too.
Yep. Many thanks to her then. And did you say there's going to be a facilitator there?
I'm going to be the lead facilitator,
Yep.
and then there are also going to be scribes at every table and also table facilitators. So let's say, there's a group of 8 people, there'll be a table facilitator at every table, is kind of making sure that everybody's heard at the table and that the discussion stays on point, and then there'll be a scribe there to take notes onto the matrix.
Are these local people or people that we're bringing in for part of this process, maybe? from the
Local,
state? Okay.
local, yep.
So, the existing hazard mitigation report was developed a while ago without any relation to how those hazards were created, right? It wasn't really
Right,
related to climate change in any
Right.
way at that time.
right.
And how much of a sense of urgency or a necessity do you feel to relate any of these to climate change? Or really is this, an opportunity to look at just mitigation of the hazards and regardless of how they come about?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I think it's both. I mean, I think that it's important to look at because this mitigation plan hasn't been looked at in a couple years, it's a good opportunity to review and dive deeper, even without the discussion of climate change, right? But secondly, I have some research from the state that shows that over the past 20 years, for example, we've had more extreme weather, and that's a fact. And the fact is it's going to get worse, and we're going to have more extreme weather. I mean, we can just look back at the past couple of weeks, and it's factual that we've had extreme weather even today, right? And so how is that impacting Sutton? So, we can, again, call it weather patterns, call it climate change, but it's heavy rainfall or warmer weather than to colder weather is impacting parts of our town.
So examples would be if you're a coastal community and you have rising sea levels,
Oh,
for example,
definitely,
you have some issues. and
definitely.
We don't actually have that here, so.
No,
i-
but
i-
we have
you mentioned-
rivers and lakes,
But you mentioned drought, and we're a farming community, so that could have some impact on our
absolutely.
economic.
And heavy rain has a huge
Sure.
impact
Flooding.
on our communities too. And the golf courses as well have mentioned that several times to me.
And I assume that in the, in sort of the lead up to this, the state has provided some guidance as to, where they'd like you to go with all of this?
Oh, yeah, I have step-by-step instructions, very similar to green communities of what I have to follow in order to receive funding.
Great.
So, yep.
Well,
One other thing, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that the state creates these programs. We don't, we're just bystanders and we watch what they do.
Or mandates.
But we go after them for the money. You know, Mike Chizzy was a big proponent of, if there's money to be had, why don't we go for it to replace what needs to be replaced? You know, the LED lights that are around town, we save $20,000 a year by doing that. We didn't do it to save the earth. It's a nice byproduct. But, you know, we did it to save money. All of the programs to the green communities, which is probably more stringent because they have the energy code and the HERS rating, which probably is an additional cost on homes. But the positive is we have almost got $1 million that has allowed us to replace equipment and improve the energy efficiency in this town, which saves us money long term. So it's all about the money.
But if I may, just to finish that thought, it's about the money to complete a project that is actually beneficial to the town. You know,
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah,
just dollars.
money's not
it's-
being wasted.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
replacing something that is expiring,
Sure.
end of life, so.
Yep.
Right.
So, okay, well, you know, I have to say, this seems like a really interesting project, and I know you have a good time and dive in deep, and you got a great team there, so unfortunately, I cannot make those dates, but I certainly, as I know the whole board does, wish you well,
Thank you.
and interested in seeing the results, so.
Thank you. Yes, and like I mentioned, well, I'll be reporting back at some point too. So, you know, we have stakeholders that were invited, but I know, you know, especially since I brought up the words climate change at a public meeting tonight, that there'll be questions about that and a report that will be available to read after, and questions that can be answered at the public meeting when I hold it.
Great.
Okay,
Great, well,
Thank
good
you.
luck, and
Thank you.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you for coming.
thanks.
Right. Next on the agenda is an intent to lay out Partridge Hill Road and Hunter's Court as a public way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will quickly turn this over to Jen Hager, who's probably far more eloquent than I am on this matter, so. And Attorney Steve Rotalakis is with her, representing John Burns.
Many of you are familiar with Leland Hill Estates off Leland Hill Road. That is a comprehensive permit project with 25% affordable units. And the roadways were always designed there to eventually become public. So the project is at the point where they are ready to have those roadways accepted as public. You have an updated set of layout plans. And the project has been reviewed by the Highway Department, the Fire Department, Police Department, and we are at the point now where we can start the first step of the public road acceptance process, which is you making a motion about your intent to lay out these roadways as public. We've done lots of road acceptances over the years that I've been here. A lot of them are public road takings where the developer has either walked away or hasn't reserved rights in the roadway. This one will be a little bit different because the developer reserved his rights in the roadway. He owns the whole road, nobody else, so they'll be deeding it over to us. So a little different process, but made very smoothly by a very well-versed attorney in this process, Attorney Rotalakis, who represents Mr. Burns, the developer of this project. So tonight would be the vote to state your intention to lay it out. By law, you then refer the layout plan to the planning board for recommendation. There, the board is scheduled to take that up on Monday night. And then I know you have a very important budget meeting at your next meeting, so we'll skip over that and then potentially schedule into that next meeting for the actual layout vote. And then the layout order and the plans have to go and file with the town clerk's office at least 7 days before a town meeting action. Once town meeting is done, you have 120 days to get the deeds and your acceptance votes of those deeds on file at the registry of deeds, and then we own the roadways.
And your intention is to have this all done for town meeting, upcoming town meeting?
It's almost all done already. Like, it's all formatted, written up, and all of that. And we're way ahead of the curve in terms of the timing on this. So we're pretty confident it can be done. There's a little bit of coordination with the closeout of the comp permit because the Zoning Board of Appeals had a number of conditions to be met per the comp permit. So, the only, I won't even call it a complication, but the only kind of hinge point is, the town wouldn't normally recommend acceptance of public roadways within a project until we're sure that all of the kind of conditions of the related housing, affordable housing project have been met. So, Mr. Rotalakis and Mr. Burns are moving on all of those items. There weren't too many, but, doing some homeowners association document revisions and, basically turning over the homeowners association to the residents that live in that neighborhood and making sure there's officers elected and that group understands what they're gonna be responsible for moving forward is really important in our opinion. Before you take over a public roadway, the people that live off that public roadway know that we're taking care of this, and per the conditions of approval and the way the project was set up, you're now responsible for taking care of these few things. It's just really working through the last details on the homeowners association. That is the only thing that's really in flux, and Mr. Rotalakis provided some potential amendments to town council last week. They're not extensive, and I feel like they can move through that process pretty quickly, so that we'll probably have that ironed out before you see me back again in March.
Okay. Mr. Rotalakis, do you have anything to add?
Steve Rotalakis, from the firm of Fletcher Tilton. I represent the developer, John Burns. Just by way of some background, I think Chief Hebert was the only member on the board when this project went forward. It was actually a co-application where the town was a co-applicant with Mr. Burns under the LIP program, the state's LIP program. This was a failed over 55 project where essentially all the infrastructure was in, but the market kind of fell out. I'm not sure that it was, from a marketing perspective, the best place to locate an over 55 project. But Mr. Burns thought there was an opportunity there for some, not lower end, but affordable, both from a market standpoint and also affordable from the state, as that term is defined in 40B, an opportunity to build some affordable housing in Sutton. There's 52 homes that have been constructed there. All but one have been sold. All 13 of the affordable homes have been sold. At this point, we are working through everything, and in fact, the audit to ensure that the developer did not exceed the profitability limitations set forth in 40B is already underway. So I think things are moving forward. We've been working very cooperatively with Jen, and I would expect that all loose ends should be tied up.
Great, thank you.
Not just me, but Lynn and John in the building department as well. We're all kind of a little team on this one.
Okay. Jesse, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I do have a couple. I believe the last time we engaged in something like this, it was a true takeover because of an abandonment.
Yes.
It was one of the little side streets off of Mendon Road, so I've been around for one of these, but I don't think I've ever been around something to this scale. So I do have a couple of questions. And again, this is just from my own understanding. Is there a cost associated to the town for this? Are we
No.
buying the road, or?
We are not buying the road. They're giving it to us.
Okay.
And they are paying legal fees associated with what town council has to review and take care of on this, that Mr. Rotalakis isn't taking care of. Mr. Rotalakis is taking care of most of the paperwork. The developer pays for the title certification and all of those things. So, and then they reimburse the town basically for town council's review of those documents.
Okay, and obviously the one thing I remember from the last takeover is this is gonna benefit us for Chapter 90 monies.
That's correct.
Because it's gonna expand the mileage in town.
That's correct. I mean, and there will be an additional maintenance cost, obviously, plowing the roads,
That's-
fixing the roads, and everything else that goes along with it. But-
Literally, you just got my next questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We're on the same page tonight, so that's a good thing. Drains, are there drainage? Because I've driven up there, but I never really obviously inspected the roads carefully.
There absolutely is a full system of catch basins and stormwater detention facilities. There are two significant stormwater detention ponds. No underground infrastructure for stormwater other than the catch basins and pipes themselves.
Yep.
So that's a good thing in that you can see,
Right.
you know, the basins, so you know when they're getting all grown up too much and mow 'em and those kind of things. So yes, there is a full drainage system. There's also a sewer pump station and related sewer line easements. There is, Wilkinsville Water District serves the project, so there are water lines.
So they have water but not sewage yet.
And a number of other related easements. The balance of this project is going to be permanently protected open space. So I worked with Mr. Rotalakis to use the state CR model to draft a conservation restriction. The town had to go out and do the baseline report, so I went out there and photographed all of the property, which is lovely, by the way. And that was all compiled and submitted to the state a little while ago. We have initial comments back from the state that are minor, so we're moving very quickly to be able to submit a CR and permanently protect the balance of this land, which is significant.
Okay, so that a lot of the open space, if I remember correctly from driving through, that's kind of like on the roundabout at the back side of the development?
The wet areas, as you go through, are minor open space parcels, but when you get on what was the emergency access road, which is now just, you know, a minor roadway, it's not really emergency access anymore. If you're facing into the project, standing on that road, kind of facing back towards Hunter's Court and Hartness Road, there is a significant bulk of land to your right-hand side, 20-plus acres.
21, 22.
Yeah. Rich DeScentz's house, I don't know if you know Rich DeScentz from the zoning board, he has a lot that sticks in there, and the open space wraps behind him and all the way down beside him with an entrance onto Leland Hill Road. It is a significant bulk piece of open space.
Okay, that's good.
In the past, Wilkinsonville Water District paid for potential public supply well drilling, so there's an actual well drill case out there where they've done some testing, flow testing for a potential public water supply location. We will reserve that right in the CR. The initial review of that was that the type of flow there is too intermittent to make it valuable for that kind of use, but you don't want to forego that right should you ever want to go back to it. So we'll lock down the use, potentially use it for that in the future. But it's a significant, large piece of open space, and it's just lovely. It has gorgeous stream bed that runs through it, and stone walls on almost every property line, old laid stone walls. It's a really nice piece of open space.
Fantastic. I have one more question for you, if I may. You mentioned that the homeowners association will have certain responsibilities. Could you just give me an example of one or two of things that they're going to have to do?
The project required some parking spaces outside the lots, so overflow parking, if you may. And so the town wouldn't be plowing those. The homeowners association has to plow those overflow parking spaces. When you exit the project and you look south, there was brush all in that area that the developer trimmed back and made sure was kept clear. In most cases, while we're doing roadside edge trimming, we'll pick that up anyways, but the association is actually tasked at making sure, because they're in and out of there every day, that they maintain some sight distance as you look south out of there.
It's a traffic issue, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, just visibility, because you know it's on the bad corner on Leland Hill. So those are the minor types of items that.
I just needed an example. I didn't quite understand. Thank you. And I do have one question for Mr. Rotalakis, if I may. You'd mentioned that they engaged in a profitability survey. Is that going to impact this transfer in any way, shape, or form if the state, kind of takes its time?
No, that wouldn't, because that's an ongoing obligation, that your road acceptance and the profitability analysis that's required under a 40B project wrap-up are not dependent on one another. If Mr. Burns exceeded the 20% profitability, which it doesn't look like he did, but the audit is not final, then he would have an obligation to write a check to the town, which the town would presumably use for additional affordable housing.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions, Wendy?
Yeah, just one quick question, Dave. Steve, are there easements that were related to the streets that are now being released? So we're taking over the streets for public access. Are there easements that are going to be trumped at this point, or?
No, in fact, I just wanna make sure I understand your question, Wendy.
Yeah,
There are
probably
no
wasn't the
easements.
most well-phrased question, so.
There are no easements, you know, in the within the subdivision layout that are going, of third parties that are gonna be affected
Okay,
by, if the town takes the road, if the town meeting deems it appropriate to take the road. But there are some easements on the open space, in addition to the conservation restriction that the town is gonna retain. Like, some of the sewer line goes, kind of minorly crosses some of the open space toward the pump station. In the event there's an issue and the town has to come in and, deal with a problem at one of the retention or detention basins, the town's gonna have that right to go in and deal with that. So there are associated easements that the town is gonna want, in conjunction with the acceptance of the road if town meeting decides to go that way.
okay. And I just had one more quick question. With regard to the HOA, is that an elected position? How is that going to be handled moving forward?
You're gonna have to, I don't, it's usually difficult to get volunteers. As
Well, now that you
many
just
of-
said
as
it on
many of you
TV,
know-
it's going to be even more difficult.
As many of you know.
Really fun.
You know, and Mr. Burns has a relationship with some, you know, I think with many of the homeowners, is gonna approach the ones who appear the most engaged. You know, perhaps serving on the homeowners association at Leland Hill. I think there's a 3-person board.
But in the event, as odd as it may be, that we don't have 3 individuals ready, willing, and able to step up, it won't cause any delay with regard to the turnover of the roads.
I can't imagine it would. You know, Mr. Burns will stay on as the developer as necessary to it.
Fantastic.
Until such time as we find the 3 suitable individuals to serve in that role. Mr. Burns has other projects in town. He's the developer of the villas in Pleasant Valley.
Yep.
He lives in town. He's not going anywhere.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Jonathan,
Mr. Chairman. Hi, Jen.
you guys know each other?
I think the advantage of a project like this or a takeover or of this type of project is that in a takeover situation, you're kind of getting the road conditions as they are, and they may not be optimal. In something like this, we've actually planned for this, and it's built to the specifications stated in our subdivision bylaws. So I think this is an advantage that we're, taking on a road that was designed so that it's gonna have minimal, challenges for the town in taking it over. I do have a question about the HOA. Being that it hasn't been formed yet and people are already living there, are there gonna be any restrictions on what they can do on their properties? Is it that type of HOA where you can we park, no trucks in the yard or anything like that? Or is it just strictly on the shared spaces type of thing?
My recollection is that the covenants that John imposed on the homeowners in terms of the use of their individual parcels was relatively minimal. The homeowners association at this point would by and large just maintain and deal with the common area. But there weren't a lot of covenants that restrictive covenants, if that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, that was my concern, and if people, because the HOA hasn't been formed yet, are they gonna be surprised that there's potentially restrictions that they may not have known when they were, buying the house?
The HOA was has been formed. Town council would like certain amendments to it. Every homeowner, the HOA is in the chain of title that precedes the deed that every homeowner got, and as part of a package, when they went to close, or prior to the closing, in fact, the homeowners were provided with a copy of the homeowners association, so they understood that when the developer exits, this is, you know, one of your benefits and one of your burdens is this 30-something acres of land
Okay, so it's just mainly the open space. Okay,
at this point.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Good questions from the board, if I may say. And I kind of feel like Jesse does, although I've been involved in a number of these things. I'm not sure quite in this circumstance. So I also had some questions. So as Jonathan mentioned, there's a number of conditions that we impose upon a developer so that the roads that we're about to take over meet a certain condition. And many of us in town remember an old project a long, long time ago where the conditions of the roads, as you know, we didn't accept roads for a long time where the bankrupt developer hadn't met the proper conditions that were there. So what steps do we take to ensure that the roads that we're about to accept have met those conditions?
Well, in this case, the bankrupt project was approved since I started with the town and since Graves Engineering was our consulting engineer. So there were some inspections when those roadways were going in. Since John took it over and continued to work and revise some of the infrastructure and had to cut and repair and do different things as these houses went in, a lot of that work has been inspected per the regulations and per the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals on the Friendly 40B project, so that the town's consulting engineer has seen kind of as we've gone along that things have been done correctly. However, when we get to the point where we're getting ready to do road acceptance, the town's engineer gets an as-built plan certifying by their engineer that the project was showing that the project was constructed substantially in accordance with the approved plans, and the as-built plan shows any deviations from the original approval documents, and those are all thoroughly reviewed by the town's consulting engineer. And then, if there are utilities, like sewer and water, those departments have to roll over the project, the as-built plans, and the site itself, and provide their approval. And the highway department goes through the project as well, because they're gonna need to be able to maintain it going forward. So, and you make sure right before the turnover, or at least right before the deeds transfer, that all the catch basins have been cleaned, all the basins are in their start condition, and everything is ready to go. So it's kind of a checklist. I literally have a checklist. In this case, this wasn't a planning board approved project, it was a zoning board approved project, which is why John Kuchar and Lynn Dolan and I are kind of working this as a team together to make sure we don't miss anything.
And do we require performance bonds of any kind for these sorts of projects?
I honestly, I think there was a performance bond, because I think I had to review that language.
There are currently, I think the performance bond against Steve Rotalakis for the developer. I think the performance bond has been, with respect to the roadways and associated improvements, is down to like $60,000 or $70,000.
Yeah.
It had been, you know, as high as I think $1 million.
Okay.
Just dovetailing back on that, when this project was, when Mr. Burns took over the project, bought it from was it Benjamin Franklin Savings Bank and another bank. It was a loan participation. The developer had failed. The project was foreclosed. John bought it from a bank. I would tell you that looking at the project, unlike a lot of projects that were bank took over, where some of the construction disbursements might have been questionable, it appears that these developers earnestly put every dollar draw that they receive from the bank into the project.
Good.
That said, when the project required a retrofit from 60-something townhouses to 52 single-family homes, Mr. Byrne, and in order to meet the specifications in the 40B approval, I think John spent an additional, $1.5 million or $2 million of infrastructure upgrades, including the sewer pump station, some of the sizing of the sewer lines, relocation of the water lines, in order that the project would function properly as designed for the 52 houses.
Okay. And so forgive me for not really knowing the process, but so along the way, as the project has sort of come to fruition, we've agreed to release some of the performance bonds because we've gotten beyond kind of the value that would be there. The proof of value is there, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah.
As John completes significant stages of construction, Graves Engineering is notified. They come walk the site, look at the bonded items that he would like released. He provides a report to the zoning board, and the zoning board votes a release or a drawdown and reestablishes or does an amendment to the bond for that new.
So is the final release approved at the point that we take it over? At that point, there's no reason to keep bonds? Okay.
Prior to that, usually, this was a tri-party agreement between the town, Mr. Burns, and Middlesex Savings Bank. So Middlesex Savings Bank guaranteed performance of Mr. Burns in the event that he fell down somewhere during the development process. But Middlesex Savings Bank was, from every home sale, Middlesex Savings Bank was taking a portion of the proceeds in order to secure their potential obligations to the town.
Okay.
But those have been reduced. Graves Engineering has reviewed John's progress in the construction. Again, I think it's only $60,000 or $70,000. He does have one additional bond that I think the town and the Department of Housing and Community Development are beneficiaries for, and that's to secure performance of the audit, which is in progress.
Okay. So really what we're saying is, at that point that we take over the property, the roadways, we're accepting that all of the obligations that were agreed to have been performed. Great. And to be clear, the previous project that I was speaking of was unrelated to this project at all, had nothing to do with
okay.
this, so.
No,
Just make sure that wasn't.
Again, the previous developers, again, earnestly, in our belief, John's belief and my belief, sometimes there are issues with how a developer uses construction draws that might not please the
Familiar with
bank,
those?
or, but it appears that every dollar they drew went into that project. They spent a tremendous amount of money.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate the education, so thank you for that. I don't have anything else, so I don't know if there's any further questions from anybody. We want to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to confirm the intention of this board to lay out Partridge Hill Road in Hunter's Court as public ways, and for that purpose to refer layout plans of such ways entitled Layout Plan for Partridge Hill Road in Hunter's Court, sheets 1 through 4, dated February 5th, 2019, and to refer to said plans to the planning board for their report.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 4-0. Steve, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
coming
very
in.
much.
Jen, thank you for everything.
Always informative.
All right. So our next item is our town manager's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few updates for the board. State aid, the Department of Revenue has come out with the preliminary cherry sheets based upon the governor's budget. The school department will receive an additional $26,520 in Chapter 78, and the town will receive $21,793 in UGA monies. But anyway, that's the former lottery account, and they just created this long, confusing name just because they can do that. The state number will increase due to the estimated charges and assessments decreasing by $35,000. So in the end, we're able to increase our state aid appropriation by $101,000 because of the decrease in charges, the increase in revenue, and then some other minor changes. You do have a copy of the state aid numbers. I've attached the cherry sheets, so we can discuss those at another time or later today. The OPEB meeting we had on Tuesday, January 29th, with our new actuary, Linda Borneval of KMS Actuaries. She did a great job and a great presentation of the OPEB liability as of June 30th, 2017, which has grown from the last actuary from $27,448,000 to $38 million. So that part of that reason it grew so much was because the last actuary never accounted for people that weren't part of the health plan while they were here on staff or are here, as well as people that opted out, chose to opt out of the health insurance and go on their spouse's plan. That's a number of employees that could eventually take health care from the town when they decide to retire. So she felt, and we agreed, that that should be part of the final formulation of the unfunded liability. The bottom line is we're doing a decent job funding the OPEB liability. Right now, we're sort of in a maintenance level of just trying to put whatever one-time revenue we can put towards this, including the $100,000 appropriation in the town budget that we have done annually for the last 5 or 6 years. Our portfolio is now over 1.4 million, so it has grown. And the goal is in 2035, we will look to the Worcester Regional Pension System. And at that point, a lot of the past retirees' liability has been paid off, and then we will have roughly $800,000 because in 2035, that account will go from $1.1 million down to roughly $250,000. If we take that money and put it towards OPEB and we don't receive any real savings but no real loss either, then that'll greatly impact the OPEB liability. So that's what we have to look forward to. We'll continue to look to any one-time revenues that we can put towards this following the Board of Selectmen's policy that I think this board is well aware of. You know, we've talked about when we sell the gravel pit, that the revenues that we get from the gravel pit will go towards the OPEB liability. So it is a challenge, but we are making significant steps. It does help our bond rating. S&P noted that when they came and reviewed our bond rating this last fall. Patrolman vacancy, Zachary Coder is leaving the department to go to the city of Westfield. He went to college out there in Westfield State. I appreciate Zachary and what he did in the year that he was here with us. Would like to wish Zachary for the best in his future endeavors. Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, as Doreen had already mentioned, will be held at Blackstone National Golf Course this Thursday, February 7th from noon to 3, and Friday, February 8th from 9 to noon. Again, we would like to thank Michael Gordon and his generosity and essentially donating the space and granting refreshments, et cetera, for this event, and that's greatly appreciated. And again, I'll present the preliminary 2020 budget at the next Selectmen's meeting.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Jim, wonderful update as always. Thank you very much. In terms of the extra revenues, you know, I'm not really going to talk about that because again, it was the preliminary draft budget. And Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna were here last night speaking to the school committee, and they had mentioned that they're in the heated budget season. They're negotiating. It's going through committees. So hopefully those numbers, you know, stay true, possibly increase, obviously. I do have one question about that, though.
Sure.
You had mentioned that we're saving money in terms of charges decreasing. Charges to whom?
Well, one of the charges, I don't have the cherry sheet here. One of the charges is school tuition, sending tuition
okay.
out.
Okay.
So in 2019, that was $132,000. In 2020, it's $101,000.
So charges essentially coming our way.
Yeah, because
based on
that's
services.
fewer students going to another school district and staying within our district, essentially.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification on that. I know it was an easy question.
Yep.
As far as the OPEB meeting goes, it was definitely informative. I will be honest with you, I am not a numbers guy, and there was points during the meeting, well, I knew they were talking about English, using English, but exactly the content, I wasn't quite sure, but I appreciate the effort that the OPEB trust team puts into this. I know you've been involved yourself, Tim, have spent a lot of man hours on not only putting a policy in place, but, trying, again, looking down the road, trying to prepare properly for, all contingencies. And to that point, and I know if the chairman was here, he'd mention this, the fact that we have a policy in place and we follow through was highlighted during the S&P visit. One of the reasons why we were able to get a AA+ bond rating was the fact that it's all written out, it's spelled out, it's been supported by the board, and we follow through.
Right, exactly.
Obviously, we're not fully funding it, but we are taking reasonable measures. So, and I think as was mentioned in the OPEB presentation, which I'm sure you can view on the town's YouTube channel for those who are interested, we're not the only town in this position. Almost all municipalities are, and everyone's trying to feel their way through. So, again, the fact that, again, to quote John, we are one step ahead, again, it speaks volume about the efforts that you and everyone involved has put in. Lastly, the loss of Patrolman Koderi, great kid, works very hard, and I wish him all the luck in his new position, because I know Westfield Gain is going to be our loss. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you so much. Just again, with regard to OPEB, not to belabor the point, I had some moments that I lost track of what I was listening to. But again, we're really in a very fortunate position that we have a very clear and laid out policy. So I'm so thankful for that. So thank you to you and Tim and everyone else who's responsible for that.
Thank you.
That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to reserve comment on the state aid at this point because it's preliminary. Be interested to see where that ends up landing. As far as the OPEB, I just am really glad to see that we're in a good position to reduce the risk, as we move forward into the future in regards to our commitments to our employees, and I think it's really important that we continue to maintain this and keep following through with our commitments on that. So it's really glad to see that we're in good shape. I too would like to wish Patrolman Coder good luck and in his time as he moves out to Westfield. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Jim, thanks for the update as always. I will comment just a little bit on the state aid. It sounds like not a lot of money, but $100,000 is actually a reasonably good starting point. I mean,
That is the best news we've had in a long
Yeah.
time. But I agree with you. It's peanuts in the big picture.
right. And to everyone else's point, there's a lot of work to be done before it's a final number, but it's a good place to start. So, in regards to OPEB, I'd like to remind the board that it is after 8 o'clock, and any discussion of OPEB is likely to put people to sleep, so we should be careful about. We've actually, had twice annual meetings. Was that biannual meetings with OPEB for quite a while. This was the best attended meeting that we've had, so we appreciate a couple of guests that came to the meeting. And as we noted at the time, it was actually an actuary that was enticing people to come to a meeting. That was interesting in and of itself. That actuary was very impressive. She did a really nice job, I thought, of presenting, kind of explaining the differences in their work versus the previous actuary's work. And I thought, as best you can do with this kind of topic, trying to boil it down to some kind of plain English about what it means and what it means to us. I know I came away, somebody who's spent a little bit of effort on this OPEB thing over time with, I think, just some clarity regarding kind of the back and forth discussions that we've had over time as to where we might want to go with OPEB. And I thought she did a nice job of helping us kind of see that a little bit. So I felt really kind of good about the meeting itself. I know it sounds weird, but I think we've been waiting for this report for quite a time, so
Yeah.
it's nice to have it. Also, I'll like to wish Mr. Cordier good luck in his new job, and I can't believe it's budget season already. Man, it comes fast.
Trust me.
So, that's what I have. Next, we move on to announcements, Selectmen Roundtable, correspondence, and business topics, and with the permission of the board, we can roll into one as we usually do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That sounds good. I have a food pantry update. First off, I'd like to thank the St. Mark's community. Once again, I delivered the monthly donations, and I tell you, in years past, around the wintertime, it seems like the donations have, just tapered off just a little bit, but I kid you not, my whole bed of my truck is full, and we have to stack, parcels inside the seating area. So thank you for their generosity. And I think that reflects that Diane only gave me a relatively small list in terms of needs. They're looking for canned chicken, Spam, hamburger helper, that's what it is, beef broth, and dish soap. And on the dish soap, that is critical. When I made the delivery, I happened to notice that there was only one bottle left on the shelf. So if anyone is going to make a donation, please add that to their list. Secondly, I'd like to mention the fact that I was in attendance last night at the school committee meeting, and the big issue of the night was the football question, and I am happy to report that the school committee voted 3-2 and decided to keep football in Sutton. So at least for the next 2 years, on any given Saturday, the fans are going to be able to go down to the school or follow the team when they hit the road and, cheer on Team Green. So, go football. And thank you to the school committee members who voted in favor. If nothing else, thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
I have nothing this evening, David, thank you.
Jonathan?
We have nothing either.
And I think I am the same. I'm good. So usually we would adjourn at this point, but tonight we do have an executive session that we need to go into. And before I read that, we need a roll call vote for that, but I would like to say that, assuming that we vote to go into executive session, we will come out of executive session solely for the purpose of adjourning this meeting. So we're going to go into executive session to discuss a personnel contract issue. That's item number 2 on the list. So to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. You all got that, right?
Yes.
Roll call vote? Yeah, set the tone. You go
All right,
first.
Anderson,
Lemanik, aye.
aye.
Mead, aye.
Hall, aye. So we're now officially in executive session, so you can turn us off.